Hey, this is Brian Parker.
This is Stefan Boltz.
This is Sarah Nofke.
This is S. Elliot Brandis, and you're listening.
And you're listening.
And you are listening to 30-minute author interviews.
30-minute author interviews.
With Preston Lay.
Woohoo! Welcome, everybody, to this episode of 30-minute author interviews. Thank you, Nicholas Sansbury Smith, for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
For those that might not know who you are or what you do, can you give them a little kind of bio on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a hybrid author that kind of writes in a couple of different genres, but primarily my thing is post-apocalyptic fiction. I would say if you know who I am, you know I write post-apocalyptic fiction. I do like to read that genre as well. So from Des Moines, Iowa, I grew up in Iowa, and I went to the University of Iowa and then Drake University for grad school. And I've always been a writer. Self-published a book it's been about 4 years now, and so that's where I got my start. I have a couple different traditional publishers now too, so that's what I do full time now, and just released another book in July called Helldivers, and I'm looking to that was traditionally published. I have another self-published series coming out soon, and book 6 of my Extinction Cycle is to be released on October 6th. So lots of new titles coming up.
Sounds like it. Now, the first book you released was the Biomass Revolution,
right?
And the last time we had you on is when we did our little 10-question written interview. And in that, you said that when you worked for the state of Iowa, you would take Cold War era tunnels underneath the Capitol complex.
Yep.
What was it about those tunnels that inspired you to write that story?
The tunnels under the Capitol complex here are used by state workers mostly in the wintertime. And so But I actually used them because I worked for the Architectural and Engineering Office of the state at that point, before I moved over to Iowa Homeland Security. And the tunnels in some areas were kind of blocked off. They're kind of in disrepair. And it kind of had a post-apocalyptic feel to it. And I kind of came up, it was when I worked at that job that I came up with the idea for the Biomass Revolution. I don't know if I would say the tunnels was exactly the full inspiration there, but it was definitely something that ended up showing up in the book. And actually I haven't thought about those tunnels for a while. I'm glad I'm not working there anymore. But yeah, there was actually, I remember they had these big orange barrels down there too, where they used to store food and water. Obviously they had expired. But the state of Iowa had fully prepared for, like many other states and, governments, local cities as well. They'd have their radiation fallout shelters in the bottom of schools or municipal buildings. So that was kind of my experience there. One of many where I got to tour old facilities like that.
And for those that might not know what your Biomass Revolution's about, can you just give them kind of the little book blurb on what that's about?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'd say don't read that book. I would probably start off with like Helldivers or the Extinction Cycle, or maybe even the Orbs series. But Biomass was just my debut novel. It's a dystopian story about a state worker who's kind of caught in a revolution. He doesn't know a whole lot about his past or who his parents were, so it's kind of a coming-to-age story as well. But like I said, it's my debut novel, and I don't really advertise it a whole lot. In fact, I haven't been asked about that novel for a very long time. But it's still self-published. I went on to write the Orbs book, set it out with Simon Schuster, then the Extinction Cycle, which is self-published, and Helldivers, which is with Blackstone, and Trackers is the next one's going to be self-published. just kind of give you a rundown of all the different things I have out there, or will.
Yeah, sounds good. So after the Biomass Revolution, you did Orbs, which you said eventually got picked up by Simon & Schuster. What did you learn in between when you wrote Biomass Revolution and Orbs that helped you get noticed by Simon & Schuster?
I spent a lot of time listening to interviews just like this, or networking with other authors and learning how Amazon works. A lot of it was my own research, just kind of watching what was working, what wasn't working for authors in my genre. So, obviously I learned how to write as well. But I would say the biggest piece of the success of the Orbs 1, which was self-published, had to do with the way I marketed that book. And since then, that was 3 years ago. Marketing's changed a lot since then. But that would be the major difference between just cold launching Biomass without really any plan behind it to understanding, at least having a better understanding of how to launch a book, how to be successful at it. And, it was really kind of Orbs just kind of went viral, though. I don't know if some of it had to do with a little luck too, I think. But it sounds like, from what I understand, my editor at Simon & Schuster was just, combing through the self-published titles, what was up the top of the charts, and she ended up picking up Orbs and liking it and contacting me, and talked to my agent, and eventually we came to an agreement for a 3-book deal with them. So, part of it's probably luck, like her seeing that book at that time.
And your books pretty much they have a great mixture of science fiction and then military in them. Is it hard for you to mix the two together?
It was because Orbs, I would say, had very minimal military themes in it, but Extinction Cycle is very geared towards military science fiction audience. Mm-hmm. And at that, when I knew that's the route I wanted to take, I hired an editor that was a veteran. I have beta, probably half dozen of my beta readers are vets as well. So I got very serious. The thing that I learned between Orbs and Extinction Cycle was also how not only how to market even better, but how to write a better book. And that really, for me, that meant researching, and having more science and more accurate descriptions of things in my novels. I think one of the major criticisms with Orbs was, the science wasn't exactly accurate in some areas. And whereas with Extinction Cycle, that's one of the biggest positives that I've seen, is that people really enjoyed the biology, and also the military folks that have really enjoyed that series have emailed about what they've enjoyed, and that also has to do with some of the characters. Like Corporal Fitzpatrick has prosthetic blades, and he's become one of the most popular figures in that book. So I have a lot of vets emailing me that are injured warriors, and they really can relate to his experience going from an injured vet back into fighting. So I guess that's kind of a long-winded answer, but it was really working. I worked with a biomedical engineer on Extinction Cycle to kind of make the science believable. So because I had always wanted to write a zombie book, but I wanted to have science in there that made it realistic, and at the same time that kind of makes it terrifying if you think this could actually happen. Right.
So how much research did you end up having to do in order to combine the sci-fi and the military for your Extinction series, for your Helldiver series? How many, hours of research do you have to do?
I would say it just depends on which series we're talking about. For the Extinction Cycle, is probably primarily where I spent most of my time researching like the military side of things and just talking with people and having them read over my drafts. But I do remember when I first wrote Extinction Horizon, that first book in the series, it was, I think, March of 2014, if I remember correctly. And I spent a couple weeks in the library here in Des Moines researching special ops and then also viruses as well. and the Ebola outbreak was going on at that time, so it was really topical. And then I kind of moved into writing the story, obviously, but then working with my editor, who's a vet, like I said, and then the beta readers. And that, I mean, that's a really good question on how much time I've spent, because I'd be curious. I wish I logged my hours to see, because I don't know. It kind of depends on the book on how many hours I spend on stuff like that.
Yeah, because it sounds like you did a lot, and I think that's one of the things when you read your books and when you read other books from people who have done their research and everything's believable, it just makes for a better reading experience all around.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Helldivers doesn't have. I mean, Helldivers is 250 years in the future, so they don't have a military. I mean, they have soldiers on the ship, I guess you'd say, but they're nothing like what we have in the Extinction Cycle, because that's pretty much status quo. Mm-hmm. And I used a Delta Force operation team, as well as, Marine Recon and Army Rangers, lots of different groups. And then the other thing, is one thing that was difficult for me was understanding all the different ranks, the difference between officers and just enlisted, stuff like that. I had to really lean on my beta readers and do research to figure out how that all works, because the littlest thing you can get dinged on. Oh yeah. And that happens all the time. Like I had an email just the other day about pulling a pin out of a hand grenade with your teeth, and how that's Hollywood. That doesn't really happen in real life.
Oh really?
Just little things like that. And I even remember having a conversation with my editor about that one point, because he said, it's really hard to do that. You can chip a tooth even. So things like that. Or I had a Facebook message today about a handgun, the difference between these two different types. So readers do notice things. And when you write in this genre, readers also expect you to get things right. Mm-hmm. And that's what I expect too when I read books. So it's very important.
For Helldivers, in the first chapter, you have this scene that I'm trying to think the best way to describe it. It really hooks you when you start reading it, and it's when they're about to make their dive down to the ground. Did you have to do a bunch of research for skydiving, or because just reading it, you had me hooked when you're talking about diving into these clouds and all the lightning going on, and it was really on the edge of your seat stuff. Did you have to do a bunch of research for scenes like that?
Well, yeah, definitely, because I actually just got this exact question in an interview last Friday, and the answer is like there's no way you can experience something like that. Mm-hmm. I've never skydived before, and that was something that I talked to my publisher about doing for the launch, like doing a tandem skydive and holding the book in that dive. And for liability reasons, obviously, it was kind of like, Nick, I don't know if that's a good idea. My agent even said that. So I didn't end up doing that. But what I did get, I really lucked out, because the editor that Blackstone hired for Helldivers had performed like almost near 100 jumps in his life. So, and he'd done some of those barefoot. Like, this guy was the perfect person to kind of go over these scenes to make sure that they were as accurate as they could be. Obviously there's some hand waving that I did with Helldivers, because these guys are jumping it. That's the pitch for the book, jumping into the apocalypse to scavenge parts to keep these airships they're on in the sky. They're jumping through these electrical storms. Their night vision goggles, they can't even use them. So they're jumping into darkness. They're completely blind. I think I said the average life expectancy of a Helldiver was like 15 jumps or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so that first opening scene was, I definitely had to research the different techniques for skydiving, how you do a flare, stuff like that. But it was just one of those things where my editor really came through helping me with the stuff that I didn't know about, that you'd really have to experience that to be able to write. And that's another thing about writing science fiction is like, there's so many things that we can't experience when we're writing stuff like that. faster than light speed travel, stuff like that. Like it's just, you have to be creative. That's why there's a thing called hand waving. But I try to use experience and realistic, accurate information as much as I can.
Well, for when the second book comes out in Helldivers, which is up for pre-order, if I remember correctly, you should do indoor skydiving, and then you can take a picture doing indoor skydiving with the book.
Hey, that's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, I never thought about that, but
I'm actually terrified of heights, but I've done indoor skydiving, and
really?
I thought it was a blast. Yeah,
that's cool. That's a good idea. That's the one thing that I really have a fear of is heights as well. I mean, I've kind of described myself as an adrenaline junkie. My online bios say, I've done a couple Ironman triathlons, but the one thing that I really don't want to do is jump out of an airplane. Yeah. I'll be honest, like I mean, even standing on a ladder sometimes has been, my gut drops. So
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So that's why, like, writing Helldivers at first, I was like, I really did worry if some of my scenes were going to be accurate. So when Blackstone hired my editor, I was really happy about that.
Big sigh of relief with him.
Yeah.
Where did your fascination for military come from?
I don't know. It really started at a young age. I remember my grandpas both telling me war stories. One was a B-52 navigator. His plane got blown in half. He was a prisoner of war in Germany. My other grandpa was like the second wave in on Omaha Beach, and he ended up fighting all his way through out Germany. So, and then my great uncle also, he was dropped off on an island in the Pacific to scout for the Japanese fleet. And he had some pretty amazing stories too. So those stories are just so like mesmerizing to me, like that these men did these things and when I was just a little kid, I just remember listening to them and thinking like, the hell did these guys go through? And later I started reading military science fiction. I've always loved that genre. And I knew after I wrote the Biomass Revolution and Orbs that was something that I wanted to write. And that's when I got really serious about finding people that could help me craft these stories.
Where do you get your ideas for the different types of, I guess you could say, apocalypses that you have your characters face? Where do those ideas come from?
I think I stated earlier that I'm a really avid fan of this genre, both, movies and books and even video games. And so I try to always look for a story that is unique. And with Helldivers, there's a lot of stories about people living underground after post-apocalyptic, you have wool, and I mean, there's just a ton of stories like that. So I started thinking about, well, what about the sky? Like, what about if we could have these airships? And I had remembered seeing an article about a new military airship that was going to be launched in like 2019. And I'd also read this book called The War After Armageddon, which was a New York Times bestseller about like the future of warfare. Very, in my opinion, very accurate of what things could be like. And it really focused on electronic warfare, like EMPs. So I came up with these ideas, these military warships that were like EMP resistant, that would have been built like 20 years from today. Like that was how they showed up in those books. So that I wanted to do something different. And then I started to do the research on what would make sense for these ships. And with Orbs, same thing, the aliens, I wanted to do something that was kind of different, unlike anything I've ever read before. And I think I said this earlier, the Extinction Cycle, I wanted to explain how a virus could mutate people into like zombie-like creatures. That was really my goal there, because I wanted it to be something you could read and think, maybe this could really happen. So I guess to answer your question, I just try to think of things that haven't necessarily been done, put a spin on them, and just write what I love to read.
Yeah. And then in the last time we had you on, again in there, you said that your books aren't just meant to be entertainment. They're meant to be a warning that this is what could happen if we aren't more careful and considerate with each other and our planet. So I guess what from your books do you currently see might be the biggest threat to us and why?
Well, in Helldivers, the world ended because of nuclear war. And in the Extinction Cycle, it's a man-made virus. And I think, there's a lot of different theories on how things could end or what could end them. And a virus is up there. And same with nuclear war. So I guess, I don't really know if I can answer that question.
It's fine.
It could be a whole lot of different things. But when I said that the books are a warning, it's more or less just that if we don't change certain things, and I said I wouldn't talk about politics, so I'm not going to.
Right.
If we don't change certain things, if we don't change some of our policies, the apocalyptic future could be real.
Yeah.
I've seen some. One of the really popular story themes right now is EMPs on Amazon, especially. If you look, 1 Second After was the big book that kind of broke that genre out, and now there's just hundreds of stories, maybe even thousands. It was zombies before, now it's EMPs, and that's actually what Trackers is about. My novel that I'm releasing, I think it's probably in December. Is still looking for a date. But actually, that might be one of the biggest threats to us, because it's one of those things that it's very difficult to plan and to mitigate from the damages of an EMP. Our grid is not prepared for it, and there are countries that have developed EMP weapons. So it's a scary thought. I think that's why people are so fascinated with it too, because it is one of the things that seems like more plausible.
And you have recently revealed the cover for Extinction Aftermath, which is going to be the 6th book in that series.
Yeah.
And you had originally planned for it to go 5, and I know that you've got 6 and 7 planned. Do you see it going past 7, or do you think 7 is going to be the end all for that series?
That's a good question. I don't think I can answer that right now. What I try to do with 5 is end it in a satisfactory way for readers where they could stop if they wanted to, and that's what I plan to do. But I've had thousands of emails and Facebook messages from readers, especially my European readers, that wanted to know what the hell was going on in the rest of the world. So that's what books 6 and 7 are about. We still have some of the main characters back in the United States as their rebuilding efforts. Because that was another question I got from readers here in the U.S. is, what about what about rebuilding and aftermath, which is what I decided to call the book. So that's why I decided to write a 6th and a 7th. After that, I have no plans for it. But I also try to leave my stories open where I can revisit them later. I think a lot of authors do that. I did that with Orbs. It did not end well. A lot of people wanted more closure, so I might actually end up going back and writing a 4th book so I can explain what happened to everybody. But with the Extinction Cycle, I don't know. It ended up going from a trilogy to 5 books to 7, and I guess just depends on what readers want. I love the storyline. It's probably my favorite that I've ever written. Helldivers is cool too, but I absolutely love those characters, and I feel like they're my friends now. So
yeah. Your Extinction Cycle is also picked up by Kindle Worlds, and that's launching this month, October. How did that come about, getting picked up by Kindle? Did you go to them, or did they come to you?
I just got a call from the manager of the program, and I always know when Amazon's calling me because I see it's like the same number. It's from Seattle, so I was like, all right. I figured it was just my Amazon rep, but it was the rep at Kindle World, and we just got to talking, and I'd seen some Kindle World books before, and I was always curious about it, and ended up deciding that it would be a good route, because there's so many stories in the Extinction Cycle that I've wanted to tell that I haven't been able to. And I've spent a lot of time networking with other authors over the past couple years. So I decided, reach out to some of these authors and see if they'd be interested in telling some of the stories that I didn't have time to tell. Mm-hmm. And what we have coming in October 20th is, I think, 12 stories now.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So it's really, really cool. Like, for example, one of my favorites is it's called Redline by Tom Abrams. Mm-hmm. And he's written on several other really successful series on Amazon. But Redline is about basically Patient Zero. The prologue of Extinction Horizon takes place in Vietnam when soldiers are first introduced to the bioweapon that ends up creating this virus later. But he's telling the story of what happened to this guy's platoon and what happened to this guy for basically between Vietnam and book one. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was really cool. And then there's, let's see, I mean, I could go into detail, but I guess I'll just say if people are interested in figuring out what the Kindle World books are going to be for Extinction Cycle, just stay tuned on my Facebook page and then my website. I'm going to have an entire page dedicated to all the different stories so they can kind of browse through which ones are out there.
That's awesome. Do you know how many authors plan on writing in it? Because you said that there's 12 initial stories. Yeah.
Well, so I think how it works is Amazon kind of works with this. It's called the seed author. So like I'm the seed author.
Okay.
And they gave me the opportunity to reach out to people to ask them to write in my world. And then they reached out to certain authors too. Like Tom Abrams, for example, they contracted with him. So there's always a Kindle World launch, which is what happens October 20th for the Extinction Cycle. And that's when all those authors that have been asked to write kind of release their stories all at once. Then after that, it kind of opens up to fan fiction. So anyone, literally, if you could write a story if you wanted it. There's no requirements besides having to meet certain guidelines on Amazon. Like, you can't write certain things. And there's a few other stipulations, like which characters you can write from, which point of views you can write from. Yeah, at that point it opens up to anyone. So I have no idea if anyone's even interested in writing in the world. But it will be advertised at that point.
That is awesome. Did you shop your Extinction Cycle around to any publishers, or did you decide I'm definitely keeping this one indie?
That I cannot say right now.
Okay.
I mean, I will say the audio rights are with Blackstone. All of the audiobooks have been published by Blackstone and are contracted through Book 7. Festa Verlag, I believe is their name. There's a German publisher. They have acquired the German translation rights. But in terms of like the paperback and ebook rights, that's still kind of a open thing right now.
Gotcha. And what you do something very cool for your readers. I don't see many authors doing it. I wish they would. At times, you offer patches to your readers if they will review your stories. Have you gotten a good response for that? And is that one of your like more successful promotions that you do?
I would say that it's been successful. Yes. What I do is, just to kind of clarify, is I offer a Delta Force Team Ghost patch if you leave an honest review on Amazon for the Extinction Cycle. Same thing with Helldivers. The publisher was jumped on that. They really wanted to do that. We gave a ton of those away for free when we were at San Diego Comic-Con, not in turn for reviews, just to give out to kind of spread the word. And I do the same thing with the Delta patches. I basically just give them to readers, regardless if they leave a review or not, just as like kind of a special thank you, because it's a very small thing. And actually I got the idea from another author, and now I see it's kind of gone viral. I mean, there's tons of authors doing patches now, because it really is an inexpensive way to thank your readers. And publishers do similar stuff with like t-shirts and posters and books, but for an indie publisher, it's difficult to afford stuff like that. Because what I used to do was I'd do contests like with paperbacks and offer, a set of my books, or to join my mailing list or whatever, things like that. A lot of people you've interviewed probably do similar things, but the patches are they're so cool because, I mean, it's kind of like having a bookmark. You can just put it in your book, or you can just keep it wherever, and it will remind you of that book later. And I love doing them. I also have, it's funny because I have pictures people have sent me. I've collected in this folder online, not like not like for real, but like I haven't printed them off. But there's like one lady sent me a picture of, I had sent her 2 Delta Force patches, and she had sewed them onto the vests that she put on her poodles. She had 2 poodles walking around with these Delta Force patches. And then I had, let's see, a lot of people put them on their gun bags, and like some people put them on their beanies, their backpacks. I mean, it's just really cool to see those too. And it spreads the word about the books in a very, cool way, I think.
Yeah, I actually have your patches on the bag I take with me everywhere, and
cool.
They're actually sewn on right next to my Ernest Cline patches that he did when he
nice
when he did Armada, I think in paperback.
Yeah, so he did them too, huh?
Yeah,
very cool.
He actually set up a video game, and you had to score a certain score, and you would get them sent to you.
That's such a good idea. Yeah, that's so cool. Like that, I'd like to do something like that in the future, but I'm sure his publisher probably helped him with that.
Yeah, probably.
But that is really cool because that really goes along with the book.
Yeah. You're constantly working on your next 1 and 2 stories, even while you're doing promotion and everything else. How do you keep yourself from getting burned out and tired of writing or of stories?
Man, it's difficult. I'm not going to lie. Like the past 2.5 years that I've been doing this full time, I've been working 7 days a week. But what I do is I take many vacations. I've taken like 4 this year already. And that really kind of helps revive me. I also do a lot of breaks. So like if I'm working from like 8 or 9 in the morning till 9 at night, I'll go for a run. I'll run errands during the day. I do a lot of things to break it up, so it's not like I'm just sitting down, chained to my desk all day long. But that does happen from time to time too, especially when I'm editing a book. And it used to be even worse when I was writing the Extinction Cycle and Orbs at the same time. That was killer. I did get burned out a little bit then, and I took like a 2-week vacation, and it really helped.
Gotcha. I heard on an interview that you did at one point earlier this year that you were reading Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel.
Yeah.
Have you finished that? And if so, what did you think?
I have not.
Okay.
I wish I would have. He was at San Diego Comic-Con as well signing that book, so I got a signed copy of it.
Nice.
But from what I've read so far, it's really cool. I like the interview format, and I think that's one reason it's really popular. Also kind of one reason I think people didn't like it in some cases if you don't like that format, but for me it really worked.
I loved it. It's probably one of my books of the year so far.
Cool. Yeah, hopefully we'll have time to finish it soon. And
if you get a chance to listen to the audiobook, the audiobook's amazing. He has a different voice actor doing each character.
That's cool. Those multi-narration ones are really sweet.
Yeah, that's really nice. Well, here at the Legendarian, we kind of like to end on a not too serious segment that we call the Legendary Ending. So these are just kind of some random questions. What songs are currently on your writing playlist?
I've been listening to the Stranger Things soundtrack on Spotify or Spotify or whatever it's called.
Right.
But what I also, I've been asked this before and it's kind of embarrassing, but I listen to like epic soundtrack music like Gladiator or I don't know, like Kingdom of Heaven, basic Braveheart movie soundtracks that kind of really get me into, because a lot of what I write is these thrillers. So it really helps get in the zone for that. So yeah, Top Gun is also another one I like. Yeah.
This one might be a little tough on you. If you were stuck in a real life zombie apocalypse and you had to be stuck with one of your book characters that you've created, who would you want to be stuck with and why?
Probably Corporal, who is now Master Sergeant Joe Fitzpatrick, because he is the damn finest shot out of anyone, and he's also I just love Fitz, and I can't even tell you how many people have contacted me about that character. And he's also now his prosthetic blades have a tip on the end of them. So not only can he run fast on those things, but he can slice and dice too.
There we go. And if you could be stuck in a zombie apocalypse with any character from any media source, movies, comics, books, whatever, who would you want to be stuck with?
You mean like a superhero?
Anybody from any kind of entertainment.
Man, I don't know. maybe Hancock.
Hancock.
He's funny too. If we could get along, I guess. I don't know. He's probably one of those most people wouldn't think of, but for some reason that popped in my head.
There we go. If you had a time machine, where would you travel and why?
I think I would have said the past, like medieval times, maybe when I was younger, but now I feel like I was born in the wrong time period because I'd love to see another planet or travel in space. So probably to another solar system or someplace where there's alien creatures. That's something that really fascinates me. Like what type of life could be out there. And it's probably something like we have no idea about.
Right.
That would look unlike anything we imagined it would look like. So something like that probably. Somewhere in the future.
There we go. If you could have one superpower, which one would you want and why?
Nothing's popping in my head on this one. I don't know, this is kind of tough, Preston. I don't know, like ability to read minds, maybe.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay. And of course, the question that we're kind of famous for: a penguin walks through the door right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say, and why is he here?
Has anyone responded with "I'm here to build Trump's wall"?
No one has said that.
Okay, maybe that. I don't know.
There we go. And then
got a sombrero on, right?
Yeah. And then before we leave, do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you would like to share with our listeners?
I would say to authors out there that listen to these, I know there's a lot of them. I was one of them at one point. I mean, I still do listen to podcasts with other authors, but I get asked all the time, like, what kind of magic I'm using on Amazon to keep my books in the rankings and whatnot. And really what it boils down to, I talked a lot in the beginning of this interview about, learning how marketing works and whatnot, but I would say just like focus on writing the best book you can and then figure out how it's going to be published, whether you're going to go the traditional route and query agents for representation, or if you're going to self-publish. Focus, if you're just starting out, focus on the best book you can write, and then kind of look to think about how you're going to publish it. Because I get a lot of authors asking me how to market before they've even finished their book. And that's kind of what I say now. And then also the last thing I would say is if you're writing in this genre, one thing I always recommend is like, there's a lot of, they're called pantsers, writing by the seat of your pants. But for everything that I do, I write outlines for, and it's just a map of where I'm going. And that has helped my writing immensely. I started off a pantser. Now I roadmap everything out, and it's doubled my basically I can write twice as fast now because I'm not, and also I don't make as many mistakes. It used to be I'd have to write the wrong thing to realize what the right thing is. Now I know ahead of time because I have it. I mean, most of the time I do, but I have my books mapped out chapter by chapter, whose POV is in each chapter, what happens in that chapter and each scene, stuff like that. So that would be the last piece of advice.
Sounds good. And where can our listeners go if they want to find out more about you or the books that you've written?
I'm really active on my Facebook author page. I'd say, I still don't know how to use Twitter. So find me on Facebook. It's nicholassansburysmith.com. Sorry, that's my website. But on Facebook, just search Nicholas Sansbury Smith.
Sounds good. Well, we'll put links to your website and to Facebook in the show notes. And
cool.
So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and joining us.
Thanks for having me, Preston.
Well, guys, that is all the time we've got for this episode. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to 30-minute author interviews. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, or your favorite social media site. And if you would, head on over to legendarium.com and check out all the places you can subscribe to the podcast. And if you would, head on over to iTunes and rate and review the podcast. It would really help us get discovered by new listeners. And until next time, guys, remember to always stay legendary. Oh, screwed that one up. Blooper reel.